Naluules, and I will be the presenter for today's coursework. My group members who are also on the call are Tugonza Harriet, Mirembe, Sandra, Kaya Farida, and Rashida Magezi. They are also on the call today. The question was identify any service-oriented or manufacturing organization of your choice and determine the cost of delivering any defined service or products they manufacture. Advise the firm on the appropriate pricing to charge with justifications. So for us, what we did is we chose the service industry and we chose Skyway Junior School in Nansana. In Skyways, we focused on the pre-primary education at Skyway Junior because the pre-primary and the primary school work autonomously. They all prepare their own books, they have their own expenses, and they are autonomous. So we went into the introduction, and Uganda's education system recognizes pre-primary as the first level of education in Uganda under 4 programs, namely daycare centers, home-based centers, community centers, and nursery schools. Early education, early childhood education and care are very critical for our physical, mental, and psychosocial development. So basically, what we are saying is this age this age of a child's education is very, very important, and it should be given focus. So Skyways came up and said, let us put up something that is to the standard and provide this high level education to the children and the residents of Nansana. So we went into defining what the cost is, because if you're costing, it is important to understand what a cost is. And we came up with a definition of and define cost as an amount of expenditure, actual or nominal, incurred or attributable to a given thing. It is the value of economic resource used to produce a thing or provide a service. Cost is a measurement in monetary terms of the amount of resources used for the purposes of production of goods or rendering of a service. So cost accounting is made up of different types. Cost accounting is made up of 2 terms: costing and accounting. Costing has 2 principles: the cost of production of goods, the cost of providing a service. Cost accounting, therefore, is the application of costing and accounting principle methods and techniques to the science, art, and practice of cost ascertainment and cost control. Cost accounting presents information that is used in managerial decision. So basically, what we are trying to say here is, if you have to understand how you're going to account for an institution, you have to understand the element of cost and what it should do, because you're going to go ahead and price a service or price a good. But if you've not understood the implication of the cost to a good, you might end up working in maybe negatives and hence making negative contribution to yourself and to the organization as a whole. So we went ahead and defined some methods of costing. We'll briefly talk about these ones. We know the job costing. The method of costing is used where work is undertaken to a customer special request. Contract costing, here we know we are costing for a contract that takes longer than a year. Then we have batch costing. This is when we are producing so many goods at the same time, and we need to cost each per piece. We have process costing. Process costing is when we are costing for a final product that becomes a raw material in the next process. Then operational and service costing, which is going to be our focus today. This is a method of costing. This particular method of costing is used in organizations that produce a service but not goods. For example, electricity generation, transport, training, and in our case, even services of education. A cost is what is incurred to produce any item or provide a service. Various costs are incurred while preparing a product. For example, direct materials, direct costs, indirect utility costs in terms of lighting, power. The direct, we're going to talk about stationery, the thing you actually input. For example, in skies, they use books, they use stationery, they use manila, and the different things. Service costing can also be used by the company. Can be used by companies in the service industry or by companies wishing to establish the cost of a service carried out by some of their departments. Service organizations do not make or sell tangible goods. I think it's very important to note. Service costing is used in the following circumstances. This is a very important area that we want to focus on. A company operating in a service industry will cost its services for which sales revenues will be earned. For example, application of school fees, school tuition, shut is if the school actually offers their services, as is in the case of Skyways Junior School. Characteristics of a service. A service is simultaneous. It has heterogeneity, its intangibility, and perishability. Considering the service of a nursery school, the consumption of education is simultaneous, and therefore it cannot be inspected for quality advance, nor can it be returned if it is not what was required. Education is heterogeneous, and so that exact service received will vary each time. I think that's the point of continuity. The cost of a school, service-oriented, unlike other businesses, are broken into 2. That is direct and indirect costs. The direct costs are the costs that go directly in providing the service, and we talked about them earlier. This includes direct labor. For example, our school, you'll find that every class has teachers that are allocated directly to those students, and they don't go to different places. Indirect costs are those costs that do not go directly into the provision of a service, but are needed to run the business. These include rent, maintenance, security, among others. Pricing strategies considered. Pricing is the process of, first of all, fixing the value of the produce receives in. Pricing is a process of fixing the value that the producer receives in exchange for the service or good. So for us, we consider the cost-based pricing. This is the process of setting price of a good and services based on the costs incurred. In calculating costs, using cost-based pricing, a business adds up all its costs and then applies the markup. In our case, we use the 50% markup. This is the process of adding certain percentage markup for the service to determine a certain price and to be charged for the production and delivery of a service. This involves, first of all, determining the cost, then you add the markup, so that you find the total revenue to expect from the school. Then you divide it by the number of maybe students in our case that are going to actually bring in these resources. So we had a Skyways Primary School Service Summary Report. So we identified that it is an education center. Full-time students are 80 between the ages of 0.5, which is half a year, to 5 years. Maximum years of stay is if you come in as a baby. The maximum time you can stay in our school is only 4 years. Pupils, there are pupils and English learning pupils. We consider the term. Some schools have 4 terms, ours has only 3. And in the 3 terms, which are 3 months, the period of study is 60 days. The school has 4 classes, and each class sits a maximum of 20 students. Our classes are identifying that we have 4 classes. We have 4 classes. We have the Starstruck Play class. That one admits all the babies half of a year as soon as they start winning to 2.9 years. Then those students are promoted to baby class where they actually start studying. The middle class at 4 years, upper class, upper pre-primary 5 years, and then they can get into the primary school. The star class has 3 permanent staff, which is an instructor and 2 nannies. Why do we have 3 people here? Because they are babies. We want someone to cater for them in terms of messes up and all those things. The other 2 classes, each one has a class teacher and an assistant teacher. So that is for the teaching staff. So we get into the full staff composition. The Skyways Junior Pre-Primary section has a head teacher, an instructor for baby class, 2 nannies, 3 class teachers, 3 assistant teachers, 2 cooks, office administrator, secretary, security guard, nurse, 2 part-time teachers, 1 of music, 1 of dance, making our total staff composition made up of 20 staff. Now, what did we look at? We looked at a scenario where our school actually spends, for it to happen, it spends on 100 people, our 80 students and our 80 staff. So we got the cost of maintaining these people during school time, or for the core staff like the security people, even after, we got that cost of maintaining them for a full term, which is 3 months, for us to be able to come up with what we will charge for them to them as school fees. We had a summer Skyways operating standard. Skyways Pre-Primary does not maintain any staff on their payroll in non-term period, holidays and breaks, for example, the COVID period. We do not maintain any staff, with an exception of a security guard, because at all times, our property at the school, our property of our students has to be taken care of. Skyways Pre-Primary is a profit-making school with all revenue contribution recovered from school dues. So whatever will be our cost should be recovered from our 80 students, and that is where we got the basis of how we came up with our school fees. Skyways is a very popular school in Nansana and is always full to capacity. It's important to note there is no point of the year we are not full to capacity. In fact, we even have a waiting list for those that drop out. They are always teachers, they are always parents who want to have their children admitted into this school of ours. The pre-primary section of Skyways operates autonomously from the other section of the school, such as the lower primary and upper primary. So what are we doing? What does this mean? There are no costs that flip into the primary sections. There are no costs of the primary sections that fit into the nursery section. Everyone manages their balance sheet and budgets for their profitability and reports independently. Skyways Pre-Primary endeavors to provide a well-balanced diet for the learners to foster proper education. Why is this important? Because we have a significantly high cost in food. So it's important that we understand the fact that it is the school values the fact that children have to be fed well for them to study well and get the education that they require. So we went else to produce what we call the expense schedule. And this expense schedule usually is something that is a standard document that we use. Why is it so? Because annually our suppliers they bid for these services and they confirm the price that they'll give us through the year, and this can only be revised on an annual basis because our suppliers have fixed prices for how much they give us these items. So we first looked into the salaries of all our 20 teachers at their rate for those periods. You're going to notice that some of them, like the Ascaris, their unit, which is the monthly payment, is 4 months, because we talked about the fact that for them, they are paid throughout the year, because whether the school is owned or not owned, they have to be paid. And then you notice the teachers, the cooks, the nuns, the office administrators, the nurses, the secretary, but then they only paid within the term period, because that is something that we have to take on seriously. We also have our part-time teachers. Our part-time teachers are paid on a monthly, they're paid per session, and their payment rate is 20,000. So the music teacher comes in twice every week, and if our term has 12 weeks and 60 days, that will come into 24 times, and then our dance teacher comes in once, gets 12 times of that pay. We also budgeted for the utilities, as you can see in our presentation. Then we went ahead and also budgeted for the food, like I talked about earlier. This is how much we spend on food. Throughout the term, we use 10 bags of rice, 20 bunches of matoke, 5 sacks of Irish potatoes. We have some 5 bags of rice, 1 bag of nuts. We give our children some chicken. Then there are chicken spices. Those ones you can't exactly say now, Roy, or this, and those other fresh market supplies. We budget for them at once, and we know how much we spend on them weekly. We get this figure, and they spend on it on a weekly basis. They put this aside for butunguru, onions, tomatoes, etc. Then, of course, we use some sugar. Our children eat some bread. So we also got into the stationery and listed down the things that we use per term. And then we came up with a full expense sheet with a total of 49,621,000. That is how much we spend on the school in 3 months. So if we are using our cost-based pricing, like we talked about earlier, we apply a 50%, and our markup is 50%. We apply a 50% on our total expense figure to get an expected revenue collection of 41, because all this money has to be collected from the students. So when we get our expected revenue, we get our number of pupils, divide it, and we get a figure of 930,000. We're only up to 930,000, but there is also a development contribution. This development contribution was meant to contribute to buying the van, and this van is going to still be used by the students when they're going for education studies, for example, to the zoo, to the museum, and other things. We also talked about disadvantages of cost-based pricing. The approach sets costs solely to the context of internal physical need and tend to ignore the external place. It can strongly work with institutions with high demand. That is one of the disadvantages. And like we've told you, like I mentioned earlier, our school is on high demand because of the quality and standard that it has set. Other pricing options we could have considered: computer-based pricing, non-incremental price increase, tuition reduction, differential pricing. Disadvantages, we also looked at some disadvantages for service costing. It is difficult to determine a realistic cost unit that represents a suitable measure of the services provided. It's hard. For example, you notice that when we went to the kitchen, we had to put a full amount because it is very difficult to say enough day. We got tomatoes of 500, but you just always have to budget within that area, because those are services that have to be tendered to different vendors. Our conclusion: generally, schools use some contribution of this strategy based on their market position and physical circumstances. Using cost-based costing, we are able to come up with a fee of 980,000 per pupil. We rounded off the small figures because it's difficult to balance these things. Our school maintains 80 pupils, 20 staff per term at a cost of 49,651,000 shillings, and with an expected markup of 50% and an additional development fees for the contribution. We are trying to justify how we came up with a figure of 980. The expected revenue per term is going to be 74,431,500 shillings for the school to remain profitable while operating at its maximum capacity. Maximum capacity in terms of full staff, we have a full staff base, we have full enrollment for the school. How are we justifying our fees? One, and a very important point in the school, is the high quality of education offered and standards set at the school. And then the other one is the cost incurred from an accounting perspective. The cost incurred for us to remain profitable, we have to put in consideration the cost we've incurred and the markup we've decided to put in the school. And when you calculate that too, based on what the board has decided, we recover under costs. That is one of our other justification. Then the other justification is success of admissions to affluent schools of the people hailing from Skyways Primary School. What do we mean by this? When we see the number of people getting into very good schools and excelling in those good schools coming from Skyways, that is justification and gives us confidence that yes, what our parents, our pupils get value for this money that they pay in our institution. Then the level of professionalism at the pre-primary section of the school, I mean, the way we pay a professional